panel continues.
Representative Weldon, in your opinion, what are the most important parts of the Defense Authorization Bill?
Well, in this bill, Congress exerts its rightful responsibility under the Constitution to make changes to what the President and the Secretary of Defense have asked for. In my area, which I chair the major platforms that we're going to buy, we cut back in a significant way funding for technology that may in fact emerge 5, 10, 15 years from now, and we put that money into the needs of our military today. We increased funding for dealing with the problems that our troops are experiencing in Iraq and Afghanistan. That includes dealing with these IED devices. It includes dealing with the threats that the al-Qaeda terrorists are imposing on our troops and causing us casualties. It also changes the proposed increases in TRICARE costs for health care for the troops, and puts into place the funding that will allow our troops to have a pay raise, give them the quality health care that they and their families deserve. It makes sure that we maintain the morale of the troops and their families so that they want to continue to volunteer. It also increases the end strength of our military, providing additional funds to increase the size of our military units to meet the needs that are currently underway. It makes reforms to systems that benefit the troops, and overall it puts the focus on the warfighter that is in the theater of operation today. It also provides significant increases for the National Guard and the Reserves, both in terms of equipment and in terms of the support they need to return back to the states and take care of their states' needs as well as our national priorities.
According to figures provided by the House Armed Services Committee, the House version of the defense bill is at $512.9 billion, the Senate version $517.7 billion, and the President's request was $510.2 billion. How do you get those numbers to even themselves out?
Well, that will take us to a conference process where we first of all work with our Senate colleagues. That process will begin immediately. In fact, we've started those discussions with our Senate counterparts kind of off the record already. And as soon as the bill is off of the floor this week, then we'll move into intense discussions with our Senate counterparts, and we'll rectify the numbers, and at the same time we'll be talking to the White House about what they're willing to accept. So it becomes not just a process of the House and the Senate, but also involves the White House and the Pentagon leadership, so that we end up with a final number that everyone can live with. And the difference just reflects the different priorities that the two bodies and the White House have in terms of where we should be going with our military budget.
We're talking with Representative Curt Weldon of the House Armed Services Committee about the Defense Authorization Bill. If you want to get involved in the conversation, the numbers there on the screen, 202-737-0002 if you support the Democrats, 202-737-0001 if you support the Republicans, and 202-628-0205 if you're a member of an independent group. What do you see as the major differences between the House bill and the Senate bill that may cause some sort of spirited debate, or that's going to tie you guys up?
I don't think we'll have that this year. We've worked very hard to try to avoid the kind of contentious debates that caused us to go right up until the end of the last session of Congress. We've been working very closely with Senator Warner and Senator Levin. We have the highest respect for members on both sides. So I don't see the kind of contentious issues that occurred in the past. And I'm proud of our Armed Services Committee. It's one of the largest committees in the Congress. I've been chairman of a subcommittee for 12 years. And in 12 years, I've never had a split vote on any issue, which means before I bring the bill to the mark of my subcommittee, which has 28 members, I consult with my colleagues on the Democrat side, and we work out our disagreements. We try to make this committee as nonpartisan as possible because we believe that protecting our troops and our military, in fact, is supported by both Democrats and Republicans, which it is consistently. So I do not see the contention on the House floor. There will be some amendments and there will be some split votes, but by and large we'll get a solid vote on the bill. And when the bill came out of committee, only one member of the committee out of 62 voted against it. And I expect that same kind of lopsided vote on the House floor. And I think you'll see us move very quickly to get a bill with the Senate that can come back for a conference report sometime by midsummer, so the President can then have a chance to sign that bill into law.
Lake Placid, Florida, you're on the Washington Journal with Representative Curt Weldon.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
I was listening to your statement there, Senator Weldon. It's nice to see you. However, the budget, I'm just wondering if they're going to take this budget and earmark it with a bunch of writers on there for extra spending like they normally do, which I would hate to see. I would like to see a clear budget that covers all facets of our defense. However, while you're here, could you please brief us and update us on Able Danger? It seems like anybody who says anything about this in the media or anywhere becomes persona non grata. And I think there's many people out here that want to know what's happening with that. So,
I thank you for the call. And on your first point, the committee is moving to have any member that requests additional funding to identify themselves. But, you know, I would defend the right of the House and the Senate to make changes. The initial request by the White House has their priorities and the Pentagon's priorities, and they're not always in line with what's best for the troops. I remember back in the 90s, the Clinton administration, on more than one occasion, never requested funds for a pay increase for the troops, while requesting funds for pay increases for our civilian federal personnel. Well, you can call that an earmark or a plus-up, but we happen to think that it was good sense that the Congress, both Democrats and Republicans on the committee, provide significant pay increases for the troops. We just felt that was right. So I think what you're saying is if there are other efforts, well, there are always changes to the budget. In my own case, unless the military wants an increase, I will not support it. On Able Danger, I'm glad you asked the question. Because there has been resistance by the previous administration and by some in this administration not to have this story told. The good news is the Inspector General for the Department of Defense is continuing a major investigation that I think is going to bring forth some significant revelations to the American people and significant changes in the intelligence oversight and what was done to Lieutenant Colonel Scott Schaefer and other members of the Able Danger team. Along with that work, I can tell you that I have a new witness. I've not announced this yet, so you've allowed me to offer this to our viewers. Another member of the military has retired and has come forth and will verify everything that the Able Danger team has said. You know, the American people have a right to know what happened in the run-up to 9/11. This is not about embarrassing people. It's about facts. And clearly, the Able Danger story that was completely kept out of the 9/11 Commission report, that has not been welcomed by either administration, needs to be told. 248 of my colleagues signed a letter last fall that I sent to Secretary Rumsfeld demanding that we allow the Able Danger principals to testify in an open forum. We've had one hearing. The investigation continues. The information continues to come out, and I can tell you the American people deserve to have answers, and as long as I'm in Congress, I will continue to push for what really happened in the run-up to 9/11.
We continue the discussion regarding the defense bill in the House with Smyrna, Georgia, on our line for Democrats. Good morning.
Good morning, y'all. Morning, Congressman.
Good morning.
I was wondering about what your statement was on the TRICARE position. I'm a retired veteran, Vietnam, Air Force. That's about it.
Well, first of all, thank you for serving. You're the kind of person that many of us on the committee write this bill for, because in the end, it's not about profits for defense companies. It's not about jobs in congressional districts. It's about whether or not we are living up to the responsibility that Congress has in giving the benefits and the support to the men and women who serve our country and their families. And if we back away from that, then we're not doing our job. And we've done that throughout this bill with Democrat and Republican support. We have put into place additional protection funding, as I said, for our troops that are currently serving to minimize the potential casualties that we're seeing happen in theaters like Iraq and Afghanistan. But in the area of health care, John McHugh, our very capable chairman of the Personnel Subcommittee, and Duncan Hunter, chairman of the full committee, and Ike Skelton, they've gone to great lengths to make sure that we don't have massive increases in the costs of health care for our active duty personnel and as much as possible for our veterans. We have, in fact, taken away requested increases by the White House and the Pentagon for the co-payments that our military personnel would have to meet. And we've said that's not really living up to the commitment that the American people made to these individuals when they agreed to serve our nation. If you want specific details on a number of TRICARE initiatives that we've put forth, if you'll call my office or email my office today, I'll give you a complete summary of all the changes. Your member of Congress may have the same, but you contact my office as early as 8 o'clock this morning, and we'll get those specifics to you.
And you can also find the Defense Authorization Bill hyperlinked on the C-SPAN website. Next up is Los Angeles, California on our line for Republicans. Good morning.
Yes, I'm a Christian, but what I don't understand is if we're supposed to be a Christian nation, how come we're spending more money or as much money as the whole rest of the world on weapons and war? If you look at anything that Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers and so on, and yet we are now the warfare nation. I don't understand. Could you try to explain, please?
Absolutely. And what I would say, first of all, is let's put our defense spending into proper context. If you compare our defense spending today, and let's pick a previous time, I would not pick Ronald Reagan. That would probably be unfair because he led a massive increase in defense spending. Let's pick John Kennedy. When John Kennedy was president of the United States, we were spending 9% of our country's gross national product on the military. We were spending 52 cents of every federal dollar on defense. In today's budget, we're spending a little bit over 3% of our total GNP on defense, and we've significantly reduced the overall amount of money to the point of spending somewhere in the 21 to 22% range of the total federal budget. So we have, in fact, been making economies of scale. And back when Kennedy was the president, you had a draft. We sucked young people into the military, paid them nothing. Most of them weren't married. Today we have an all-volunteer force. Many of our military personnel have college degrees. Many have graduate degrees. So the cost of the quality of life, housing, education, health care, travel, all of those are the most significant cost drivers in terms of our defense budget. And if we're going to have an all-volunteer force, we've got to make sure that they're taken care of. Now let me get to your point about peace. I take that very seriously. That's why, as the Vice Chairman of the Armed Services Committee, I went to North Korea twice. I sat across the table from Kim Gai-gwan to try to achieve a peaceful resolution, which I'm optimistic we'll get. I went to Libya, met with Gaddafi 3 times in a tent. Today, we've removed 60 metric tons of weapons of mass destruction from Libya without firing a single shot. And that's why I'm working on countries like Iran. I wrote a book about Iran a year ago, basically acknowledging the CIA hasn't gotten it right for the past 3 years. Predictions that I was given of what was going to happen with Iran's undermining of Iraq and Afghanistan are all now true. So many of us on the committee take our primary responsibility, not just to equip the military personnel, but to avoid conflict. You know, the worst part of my job in 20 years that I've been here, the worst part of my job is to sit in the living room of a young family where a son or a daughter or a mom or a dad or a husband or wife has come home in a body bag, and to be able to look that family in the eye and tell them that my vote was justified in putting them into harm's way. There are times when our country has to stand up, and we will not shrink from that. But overall, I can tell you, our committee, Democrat and Republican alike, works to make sure that military option is always the last option. But when we do put our military in harm's way, that we give them the best equipment, the best technology, and the best training that your money can provide.
Representative Weldon chairs the Tactical Air and Land Forces Subcommittee. He's in his 10th term and representing the 7th Congressional District in southeastern Pennsylvania. Tell us about how some of the numbers were achieved in the defense bill, specifically the supplemental funding for the war in Iraq, which is at $50 billion, the National Guard personnel, $471 million, and the 2.7% pay raise, $300 million.
Well, what we do, we take the budget sent over by the Pentagon, and then we hold hearings. And each of our subcommittees, with strong bipartisan involvement, go through the various parts of this bill in finite detail. We bring in the military witnesses to present the official case for the Pentagon, but then we bring in the representatives of the groups that might represent the families, that might represent the service sector that are not involved in the Pentagon's operation. And then we have to balance that. We go through the program request. You know, one of the biggest programs we have today is the Future Combat System Transformation of the Army. That's a total 20-year cost of $160 billion. and the oversight is completed by the Boeing Corporation, and part of it's in my district. I was very aggressive with that program for the third straight year. In fact, my subcommittee, Mark, cuts that program by $350 million. And we cut it because we feel that we need to have more control over the way that we're spending the dollars. We felt there was too much built-in leniency for the corporate leaders as compared to the other priorities that our military personnel have. So we have a give and take, and we have a very competent, professional, nonpartisan staff. Many of them are ex-military. They're people who really take their job in a very serious way. They go through these budgets in a very aggressive manner. They allow us to understand the need to ask the tough questions of the Pentagon. And in the end, we make some decisions that are not very well received by our Pentagon leaders. That's why the American people put us there. That's why our Constitution requires that there be this check and balances. We don't just give the Pentagon a blank check. You know, and to get back to your other caller, I'll give you one other position that we took in my subcommittee with, or the full committee with John Spratt, a capable Democrat from the South. We put together an amendment that provides additional flexibility in using our dollars to deal with emerging weapons of mass destruction threats in countries other than the former Soviet states. To give the administration the flexibility to go into a North Korea, to go into a Libya, to go into an Iran where we have worked out agreements and use some limited parts of these dollars to remove those weapons, bring them out, and eventually avoid that material getting into the wrong hands, getting into the hands of a terrorist, getting into the hands of a rogue state. And so the bill has a very comprehensive approach. I'm proud of this bill. I'm proud of the work that my colleagues on both sides of the aisle have done. My ranking member, Neil Abercrombie from Hawaii, has been very aggressive. We took on the presidential helicopter program. We cut that program because Neil did his homework, and he was right, and I supported him. We want this aircraft to be the safest aircraft possible. We received some pressure from the White House to move this aircraft along faster than what we think we're comfortable with. And so we took the steps to slow it down. Does that upset some contractors? Absolutely. Did it upset the White House? Perhaps. Is it the right thing to do? Overwhelmingly.
You've got an amendment in the bill calling for a sense of the Congress that U.S. and Russia should cooperate on missile defense. Explain that for us.
Absolutely. I'm very upset. I was the author of the missile defense bill that passed back in 1998 with a veto-proof margin. Not because we wanted to back Russia into a corner, but because of the emerging threats from Iran and North Korea and even China. And in passing that bill, I made the case that we had to have Russia as a partner. We had joint programs with the Russians. Unfortunately, 2 years ago, the administration cut off our cooperation with Russia. That sends a wrong signal. That sends a signal to the hardliners in Russia that we want to have a competition with them, that we want to have confrontation with them. And so one of the things that I'm continuing to discuss publicly, which is embarrassing to the Pentagon, is I want them to get back on track and have a cooperative relationship with the Russians on missile defense so that we learn from them and so that we build a better base of understanding to avoid the potential of our two countries ever again entering into a Cold War era.
Belleville, Illinois, you're on the Washington Journal with Representative Curt Weldon.
Yes, good morning, Representative.
Morning.
If 9/11 proved anything, it's that we don't have any defense. And secondly, would you talk about the 300,000 troops from Gulf War I who are suffering from depleted uranium poisoning? And whose idea was it to use nuclear waste in our munitions? So we're spreading weapons of mass destruction and chemical weapons all over Iraq. Why don't you talk about that, Representative? Thank you.
Well, first of all, I would tell you that the Congress has worked hard to remove weapons of mass destruction. The Congress has taken action during the years that I've been here to reduce and eliminate any potential use of chemical, biological weapons. I put into place in this piece of legislation a nuclear strategy forum, because I'm not happy that we have a long-term grasp on the potential use of nuclear weapons. And I want an open and honest debate on that issue so that we can discuss things like the deep nuclear earth penetrators and the new kinds of technology that some of our scientists have been researching and proposing. That nuclear strategy forum is now stood up and operational. And I think it's doing a commendable job in bringing in leading scholars from all sides of the political equation. My ultimate goal is to reduce the use of nuclear weapons. And this is happening, I think, in a very aggressive way. We have to continue and renew our efforts in that regard. In terms of using nuclear nuclear waste and weapons in Iraq, I'm not aware of any incident where that is the case. In fact, I have grave concerns that we would ever use a nuclear weapon in a theater involvement unless there was some overwhelming justification, which would be very hard in my mind to come up with. So I can tell you that and reassure you that the Congress is a check and balance with those in the Pentagon who may want to go too far. That is our constitutional right. It's our prerogative, it's our responsibility, and we don't back away from that. And our colleagues on the committee, both Democrats and Republicans, will tell you that we stand up and make tough choices. It was the Congress last year, under the leadership of Chairman Dave Hobson, that actually reversed the idea and notion of the administration, some in the administration, that wanted to move toward new types of small nuclear weapons. That was led by a Republican. So there are efforts in the Congress to provide that system that our founding leaders wanted us to have, and I think it's working quite well.
Earlier this week, the Philadelphia Inquirer had an article that suggests that 40% of your campaign contributions have come from defense interests. Does that cause any concern for you or your constituents?
No, I mean, I would expect that. If you work defense, you know, every member of Congress is basically assigned to a committee, and that's where you focus. So if you spend 20 years on defense issues, and I'm also vice chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, which is domestic defense, I speak at probably hundreds of conferences in this city and around the country on a regular basis. People that support defense and security would probably be the people that would be interested in supporting me. People who are on the Education and Labor Committee probably get significant contributions from the labor unions and from educational advocacy groups. I'm proud of my supporters, and in my district I've tried to allow us to be on the cutting edge of developing technology that, one, helps us deal with a budget that is incapable of meeting our defense needs of the future, and also to provide better ways and more efficiency in building platforms that protect our troops. So no, I'm proud of my support, you know, no company can make a donation. These are all employees who work hard for the defense of America, and I'm proud to accept their support in my reelection.
Mansfield, Ohio, go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I would just like to encourage Congress and the President to make certain our young men and women who are overseas risking life and limb to protect us, that they would make certain that these people have everything they need, including a reasonable pay. I don't think military people are paid for the risks that they take to support America. And instead of congressmen pushing for large weapon systems and so forth, which are in their district, that they don't want to have discontinued, they ought to think about using all that money to pay for our troops and make sure that they have the body armor and the actual materials that they do need to fight wars. And that's my comment. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the comment, and I agree with you totally. In fact, we've done that. As I mentioned, back in the 90s, there were a number of defense budgets sent to us with no request for pay increase for the troops. We felt that was outrageous. At the same time, the Clinton administration was requesting money for civilian pay increases for federal employees. There was no request for military personnel. We in the Congress, Democrats and Republicans, changed that. We provide those increases. There is an increase for the military today. It's 2.7% in this budget, which is what we think is about right. In addition, I would say to you that we have cut back major weapon systems. That's basically a generic thought that people have that's just not true. As I just mentioned, I personally, in my committee, cut back $350 million on a major Army program that Boeing is operating. We cut back on a helicopter that's being built by the Lockheed Martin company by a significant amount. We've eliminated programs. The Aero Common Sensor, we had a problem with the way it was being managed. We cut it out and eliminated it totally. We did the same thing with the Comanche program that was being built by a contractor from my district and Sikorsky. So the caller needs to understand and look at there are members of Congress that are willing to and are making tough decisions and cutting back programs. You know, sometimes the mainstream media just doesn't get it and they don't do their homework. If you get online, as was suggested by Rob, and if you look at my own website and other members' websites, we are making the tough choices. We are delivering what the American people want. A responsible defense budget that, number one, takes care of the priorities of supporting our troops, pay, health care, housing, education. Those are our top priorities.
Representative Curt Weldon, thank you very much for being on the program.
Rob. Good to be with you again.
After a short break, we're going to be talking with Representative Tom Davis of Virginia. He's talking about getting FEMA out of the Department of Homeland Security. We'll ask him about that, as well as his op-ed piece that he wrote earlier this week in the Washington Times, Getting FEMA Wrong, Senate Bill Would Take Us Backwards.